So without further ado, the power of HubSpot lead scoring. For those of you who haven't met with me, my name's Dan Jenkins. I'm the commercial director here at Wagada Digital. If you scan that QR code to come and reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, if we're not already connected, I'd love to take the conversation further there. Background to us as a digital agency. We're a full service digital agency. We have offices in London, St Albans and in Cheltenham as well. We work with brands across the regions as well as nationally and indeed internationally. We have amassed a wealth across a range of media and entertainment, AV, care, the list goes on, cyber tech and SaaS. We have a team of HubSpot experts, one of which is joining me on the call today. We offer 4 core services, digital marketing, website development, employer branding as well. Just a couple of quick things before I hand you over to my colleague James, who's going to be taking us through this session. James and the AI team actually here at Wagada Digital have done some great work in terms of answer engine optimization, AEO, and GEO, generative engine optimization, and put together in the last week this fantastic report, which is an AI search optimization best practices. Feel free to grab it through the QR code and we'll send it with a link in the follow-up as well. But it's something that we're working on with clients. And obviously, if you'd like to find out more about our work in this area, getting you seen across large language models and on Google AI overviews, don't hesitate to give us a shout because we're making great gains. And the search landscape, folks, is changing exponentially. So yeah, in the next 12 to 24 months, the focus is going to be on this area more and more. So grab that checklist and you can find out more. And just finally, our spot check offer, whereby if you are currently using HubSpot, if you want to get more out of HubSpot, it's completely free, no pressure review. Our team will jump in, give it a very top level audit, let you know some of the things you can be doing differently and send that across to you. And it will be done by a human, not by AI. So if you'd like that spot check, again, you can grab it through the QR code or reach out, drop me a message on LinkedIn and we'll get your HubSpot checked. Fab. So that's enough from me. I'm now going to hand you over to our digital transformation specialist, James, who's going to take you through the power of HubSpot lead scoring. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Dan. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm James, digital transformation specialist at Wagada, and I've been at the company for over 4 years now. I'm part of the transformation team where we support our clients with their HubSpot needs, as well as the general maintenance of their HubSpot accounts. And with these accounts, I've worked on a number of lead scoring campaigns, and today I'll be running through some thoughts to help you with your own lead scoring setup. So there's a few areas I'll be covering this morning, and we'll start off with a little intro to lead scoring in terms of what it actually is and why you should use it. Some of you might already be aware, but HubSpot actually rolled out a new version of lead scoring at the end of August, sunsetting the previous tool. So I'll also touch on some of the key differences between the previous lead scoring tool in comparison to the latest version. And with this in mind, we'll have a look at lead scoring examples in action and how the scoring works in terms of setup with the updated tool. And lastly, we'll have a look at some of the key things to consider to help you get the most out of lead scoring. So yeah, lots to cover this morning. So yeah, let's kick things off with thinking about what HubSpot lead scoring actually is. And put simply, it's a system that assigns scores to each contact in your CRM based on engagement and fit criteria they meet. And what I mean by that is how closely they match your ideal customer profile, your ICP, and how engaged they are with your business. So fit-based scoring looks at static attributes such as job titles, industry they're in, company size, or location they're from. Meanwhile, engagement-based scoring evaluates behavioral actions such as opening emails, visiting high-value pages, filling out forms, or attending webinars. Then you have combined scoring, which is the best of both worlds. But why use this? Well, by combining these, HubSpot generates a score that quickly shows your sales and marketing teams which leads are hot and most likely to convert. And just to expand on this, it helps your sales team focus time on prospects most likely to buy, reducing wasted effort. It also helps to shorten the sales cycle, so high intent leads can be moved through the funnel a lot faster, a lot quicker. Another great thing about lead scoring is that, as I just mentioned, it can align marketing and sales. So having a shared scoring criteria ensures all teams agree on what makes a lead sales ready. And lead scoring can automate your lead management. So HubSpot can trigger workflows based on scores, such as notifying reps or enrolling leads into nurture sequences. Now, this is all well and good, but how does this play into your user journey? Well, lead scoring directly connects to different stages of the buyer's journey. So with the awareness stage, prospect starts with lower scores as they're learning about your brand. Then they move into the consideration stage. So as they engage with you, so they could be downloading guides, they could attend demos. And as they do that, their score increases. And then they'll eventually reach the decision stage. So once they hit a threshold, they're flagged as marketing qualified leads and then are passed on to sales. You've also got post-sale, which I haven't included in the image there, but these scores can be applied to upselling, cross-selling, or re-engagement campaigns. When we've worked with clients previously, 50 points has been quite a nice target threshold to tip leads into MQLs or marketing qualified leads so that they can then be passed on sales. So applying this score into the stages just mentioned, you're looking at 0 to 19 points for the awareness stage, 20 to 49 for consideration, and then anything above 50 puts them into that decision and post-sale stage. But ultimately, by mapping scores to these stages, HubSpot ensures that leads are nurtured appropriately until they're ready for that direct sales contact, creating that smoother, more personalized experience. So now you have an idea of how lead scoring works. Now we're going to have a look at what this actually looks like in HubSpot. And before I dive into the key features, it's worth noting that HubSpot lead scoring recently got a major revamp. So previously, scoring was managed through a property that looked a bit like segment list filters. You might be familiar with that. Now, this version worked and was effective, but it did have its limits. So you could assign any number of points per criteria, but it only produced one total score per lead without distinguishing between interest and fits or aging scores over time. You also had to be wary. If you look in the image on the left here, this is what it used to look like. You had a limit of up to 100 criteria, so you just had to be mindful of that. So as a result of these constraints, the community fed this back to HubSpot, and they ended up actually sunsetting this property in August 2025. So yeah, just thought I'd give a bit of context of what HubSpot lead scoring used to look like. So yeah, now let's get stuck into what the new one looks like. So in terms of how the scores are calculated, it's still the same as before, but with a slight variation. So scores are calculated based on the criteria you set for event and property rules in score groups. So each score must have at least one score group, but you can include multiple groups that add up to that total score. You can set a limit for the maximum total score, but can also set maximum scores for each group to weigh groups of criteria or events differently. So, for example, you could limit points for a group of awareness events, such as page visits, but then allow more points for a group of conversion events, such as sales, form submissions, and meeting bookings. With the new lead scoring, there are a few scoring types to be aware of. So score limit is the maximum number of points a record can learn overall. So once this is reached, no more points are added to that particular contact. You can now set this limit anywhere up to 10,000 points, which is a big jump from the original 100-point cap when it was first introduced. And just a note to say that if you look at the image on the right, you'll see that enterprise accounts, if you see up here, they can create up to 50 scores, while Marketing Hub users, they only get 5 scores to play with. So just be mindful of this when it comes to creating your scores. Up next, we've got group limit. So group limit sets the maximum number of points a contact can earn from a specific action group. So once they hit that limit, no more points are added from that group. Through group limits, those group limits still count toward the overall score. So for example, if you add 5 points for every email opened in the last 28 days and set the group limit to be 5 points, a contact opening multiple emails, doesn't matter how many times they do it, 2, 3, 4, however many times, they will still only earn 5 points in total. Now, if the limit was to be 20 points and they were to open 4 emails, they'd earn 20 points as they get 5 points for every open. But any more after that, no more points are added. But why was this introduced? Well, this just prevents inflated scores. So in the old system, every email open counted. So someone could rack up points just by repeatedly opening one message. You know, if you think about it, how many times, I'm sure we've all been there, an email comes in, we see it land in our inbox, we're like, I'm focused on something else, I'll come back to that later on. And throughout the day, you might occasionally flick through and hover out and open that email, even if it's for a millisecond, Well, in the old lead scoring, that would count as an open. So it's not a true reflection of that lead actually engaging and opening your email truly. So yeah, the new scoring just keeps things realistic by capping how much one action type can influence the overall score. And I kind of touched on it there, but the last thing to think about is criteria points, which is where points are assigned to each individual property or event rule. So points can either be added to or subtracted from the score, and in each group, the total criteria points can be below or equal to the group limit. A record's values for each group contributes to the group score, which then contributes to the total score. So you also have the option to score every time, if you see here on the left, which you'll see is a drop down. So every time a user was to open in this example here, was to open an email in the last 28 days, they'd be given 5 points each time within your group's limit, of course. Or you can limit these points. So if you were to click on that drop down, you'd then be presented with the option to limit to if you wanted to. And that's what I've done in this example here. So a user would open one email, that gives them 5 points. And then if they were to open a second email, they'd then be given another 5 points. And they'd hit 10 points in total for that group. But if they were to have any more opens after that, the score for this criteria is capped at 10 points, so they would get no more points for this particular event. And as we've already established, we know this is good for keeping your lead scoring accurate and stopping scores from becoming skewed. And I just touched on it there, but you can choose to add or subtract points. So why do this? So let's say, for example, a contact has high engagement with your marketing contact, but recently unsubscribed from your newsletter. Well, you could add points for the marketing engagement, but then subtract points for the unsubscribe. Alternatively, a company has a strong fit score based on size and industry, but perhaps they're located in a region where your company doesn't operate. You can add points for good fit industry and good size, but subtract points for a non-operating region. And you can see a quick example I made there in the left. Doing this just increases your chances of allocating points to the most relevant leads, most potential leads, whilst also reducing the chance of less relevant leads reaching that MQL threshold, meaning your teams are focusing only on the relevant leads that are coming in. Okay, so one of the other really nice new additions to the updated lead scoring tool is score decay. So for engagement or combined score event groups, you can turn on score decay, which automatically reduces an individual's event score based on how long ago a score event occurred. So for example, if you look at the example on the screen, a rule gives 10 points when a specific form is filled out. So I've gone for an email subscription form here. If this event's decay is set to 50%, as I've done here, for every month, then 1 month after that form was filled out and that same user hasn't submitted that form again within that same time period, within that month, the 10 points from that event will then be cut in half and the event now contributes 5 points to the score. Then if we were to fast forward to another month later, so 2 months after that original form submission that person made, this score would then half again. So the form submission now only contributes 2.5 points to the score. But why is this useful? So now you don't have to include timeframes in your criteria like you did in the old one, as the decay does that for you. But if you prefer, you can still keep these timeframes in. And I guess the main thing to take away from this is they're just really score decays are really handy, as it just makes your lead scoring much more fluid and accurate and less static and rigid. So once you've done all of that, you'll end up with something like this. Now, I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. And not to go all bleed Peter on you, but here's an engagement lead score I made earlier. And to help you out, I've broken down all the key scores I've made in the notes on the slide there. And you're more than welcome to take inspiration from this if you're new to lead scoring. And rest assured, as Dan said at the start of the webinar, we will be sharing the deck around afterwards, so you will be able to have another look at this again. So that was a run through of the criteria side of things for lead scoring, but now I'm going to cover some of the other aspects to be aware of with the new tool. So another new feature of the updated lead scoring tool is score inclusion and exclusion lists. So when you head to the middle tab, when you're creating your lead score, In this particular example, I was working on contacts, but if you're working on companies or deals, it will say companies or deals. So when you create a score, you can now select to apply the scores to all contacts, score specific contacts, or exclude certain contacts. So a typical example of people who you would never want to score any points would be anyone who works at your company. So in your exclusion list, one of your filters could be to capture any records that includes your company domain in their email address. So for us, it'd be wagada.co.uk in their email. So why this is good is because, well, with the old lead scoring property, you'd have to set up these massive negative scores for certain criteria individually so that you could easily define that they were not sales leads. But exclusions lists now mean that non-leads never even score a point. They never even come into the system, so you'll never ever see them. So I definitely recommend having a think of some exclusion criteria as you're setting up your lead scoring, and create that active segment list to capture all of these records so that this list remains up to date all the time. If you can try to clean out any records who would never qualify as a lead to begin with, it's better to exclude them as soon as you can, as that just saves your team so much time disqualifying irrelevant leads. The last thing I wanted to touch on in terms of when you're actually setting up your lead scoring is what you'll see in the settings tab. So as you can see on the left, there are two areas called score value and score thresholds. So as part of the new lead scoring, it creates a property where the total score is stored so that you can use this for reporting. So this score value area is essentially where you create your property name for this particular score. So have a think about naming conventions, as the chances are you'll be using multiple lead scoring groups. So you might have multiple for engagement scores, you might have a few for fit scores. So it's just making sure that you can easily distinguish between them. And then when you head to the score thresholds area within the settings tab, you'll again be asked to name your property, but this time for thresholds. So just make sure again to name, clearly distinguish and name these appropriately. But sneakily hidden at the bottom of the page, you've got to scroll all the way down, is this traffic light system. And this is where you allocate your scores based on the level of your lead, like how highly you rate them. So if they're low scoring, they'll get a red label. If they've engaged but aren't quite ready to be qualified as an MQL, they'll be yellow. If they're high scoring, they'll be green. And this color system is just to help you quickly see how each contact is performing from a visual point of view. And that leads me nicely on ways that you can actually review these scores, as once you've turned on your scores, you can then use the score properties in other tools to identify, segment, and report on your leads. So for example, you could add in the lead score widget to your right-hand side view when you go into contacts, where it will look a bit like this, this image up here. And then from within here, you can actually click in. If you click on this C score history, you'll then be presented with a report just like this, where you'll be able to see and make a note of where changes in the score have happened and when they took place. So yeah, just really, really handy to have that in place. You could create a save view or create an active segment list of all contacts with a high score according to your score thresholds, whatever you prefer. So on the screen, you'll see an example where I've used a contact view to help me compare scores between my different lead score properties. And from my experience, this has made my life so much easier in terms of visibility, as I can just see which scores my records are getting points for. You can see them here, all of these different ones in blue. And just a quick tip on this: if you're setting up more than one lead score, like I've done in here, I'd actually recommend creating a calculated property to add all your lead scoring properties together. So, your engagement, fit scores, combined scores, just to give you that true total lead score. And you can see I've included my calculated property here. I've called it lead score, and that's long here. And you can see there's a few cut off on the end, but these all contribute to this score here. So yeah, really handy, and I recommend that. But the other cool thing with this calculated property is that you can actually use this as your main trigger for your automations. So with this calculated property, you should definitely have a look at creating a workflow to automatically assign an owner to unworked contact with a score over 50, or whatever your qualified lead threshold score is. But why do this? So it just ensures that high quality leads are followed up promptly by the right team member. And that just helps with your conversion rates and your response speeds, helping your sales teams out massively. And lastly, you could create a custom report to compare lead scores or contacts by the channel they first interacted with your business. Again, why do this? So it just helps you identify which marketing channels are generating the highest quality leads, just allowing you to focus efforts where they drive the best results. And this just also means that you can keep improving and keep evolving your lead scoring accordingly. And by the way, you'll notice on the slide there, I've included some links to some handy knowledge articles in case you need any more info on these particular areas. Okay, let's take a minute to breathe. I appreciate there was a lot to cover there, but I really hope that gives you a better overview of how to set up lead scoring and what to expect. But with all of that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to my mate Dan, just to help you visualize how this all comes together. Well, let's say Dan visits your website, and whilst he's there, he downloads a resource. So we're going to give him 20 points for that. Whilst he's on the site, he sees a really interesting webinar all about HubSpot lead scoring. Who'd have thought, eh? And decides to register for it. And he's so interested that he even goes ahead and attends this webinar. So we're going to give him another 20 points for those actions. After the webinar is finished, Dan is enthralled by James's webinar. He then goes ahead and visits the website's contact page to find out more about your services. So we're going to give him another 10 points for that. And before you know it, Dan's hit that magic 50-point threshold, which is moving him into that sales qualified list. And with this list triggers a HubSpot workflow that sends him a personalized email from one of our sales reps, offering him a free consultation on all things lead scoring, and even assigns him a sales rep to go ahead and follow up and just keep him in that funnel. So yeah, big shout out to Dan there for being such a great model there. But in all seriousness, I hope that gives you a visual idea of Dan's user journey and how points are triggered along the way for him to becoming a sales qualified lead. But I just wanted to end with some things to consider before you even create your lead scores. So first of all, agree on what an MQL and what a sales ready lead looks like. So this means establishing both fit criteria, so your job roles, industries, company sizes, for example, and also engagement signals, so webinar attendance, pricing page views, things like that. What is it that you're looking for? Having this agreement in place just means sales and marketing are aligned from the start. Make sure to balance fit or engagement criteria in your scoring. So a perfect fit lead with zero interest or a highly active but poorly matched lead may both fail to convert. So use different score types to ensure you're prioritizing prospects with the right profile and demonstrated interest. So for example, someone who submits a contact or an inquiry form is probably someone who's very interested in your services and would be considered a hot lead. Therefore, you'd want to consider adding a lot of points for these types of submissions if they meet this criteria. On the other hand, perhaps other types of form submissions, so let's say a newsletter sign up, well, they might hold less weight than an inquiry form and should probably score less points for that action. So when setting up your lead scoring strategy, it's important to plan how different score ranges align with your final stages. So for example, leads with low scores should remain in nurture sequences where they can continue to engage with your content and build interest over time. Mid-range scores might trigger more targeted campaigns or personalized outreach from a sales rep just to engage that intent and move them closer to that conversion. And lastly, high scoring leads should prompt an immediate follow-up from sales as they're showing strong buying signals. So this structured approach just ensures that leads progress through your funnel naturally while your team focuses time and resources where they're going to have the most impact. Also make sure to regularly review and test. Lead scoring is never going to be perfect, but try and get as close as you can by consistently reviewing and evolving. Ultimately, markets, products, buyer behaviors, they all evolve, and so should your scoring model. And how often do I mean by regularly? Well, perhaps reviewing criteria quarterly is a good place to start, as that allows a decent amount of time for you to truly see if your criteria is appropriate. But by all means, if you notice something's not quite right in the immediate, just go ahead and change it. You could also run A/B tests on thresholds and just check whether high scoring leads are actually converting. as that's ultimately the end goal here. And also just be ready to amend point values or signals as patterns shift. And lastly, have a think about what you would like to happen when a lead hits a scoring threshold, whether that's automated CRM alerts, sales task creations, or enrollments into a personalized email workflow. Without a clear action plan, scores can lose their impact. So have an idea of the score a lead needs to hit before being passed on sales to qualify, and also consider the weighting of your criteria. I know I've said this already, but typically clients we've worked with before say that lead should hit 50 points to be considered a good quality lead, as this usually means a good number of action and a range of actions have taken place in order for them to have reached this score. So that's all for today, but just to round up with some key takeaways. So we discussed what lead scoring actually is and how it's a framework to prioritize leads based on their engagement and fit. We spoke about why you should use lead scoring. Well, it just helps you to focus your sales and marketing efforts on the prospects most likely to convert. Before you even begin to set up your lead scores, consider and define what an MQL means for your business. And just as importantly, what isn't an MQL, so that your team can focus on the most relevant leads. Remember to always evolve your lead scoring. You should be reviewing your scoring criteria regularly. You know, as your audience and business change, so should your scoring. Make sure to have a think about automation. Consider how workflows and automations will respond to score changes to inform your team on their next steps to qualify your leads. And lastly, please just go ahead and have a play. You know, you can't break it. It's a brand new tool, so everyone's in the same boat. So see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. I'm going to hand back to Dan now for any questions.
Fab. Thank you so much, James. That was a great session. Loads of insight in there. Really appreciate it. I've had a few questions come through, so we'll tackle those straight away. We're going to take it to a little bit after past, folks. For those that do need to duck out, you will get a full copy of the recording. You'll get a copy of the deck. I've also shared in the chat a number of forthcoming webinars that we've got that may be of interest. One is around employer branding at the end of this month to attract and retain top talent. My colleagues Dom and Prue are all set for that one. Getting HubSpot in shape for 2026 is one we've got coming up in November, as well as accurate conversion tracking within PPC. So do take a look at those. I've had a couple of questions come through privately. Before I tackle them, Robbie's popped one in the chat, James. Can lead scores be applied to companies based on their associated individuals' engagement? We want to record a member organization's engagement and contact those that are not that engaged. So I guess it's the balance between how we record a company's behavior and the nuances of individuals within that company. What's your take on that?
I mean, the short answer is yes, can be done. It's just going back to the whole thing where I was saying about like naming your properties appropriately. So you can have your different scores set up. You might want to have a think about, say, you have a dedicated score set up purely for contacts, one for companies, one for deals, just to keep them separated. But the answer is yes, there are different properties available. There's associations set up between companies and contacts still. So yeah, the answer is yes to that.
Fab. Thank you, James. Robbie, if you want to find out any more about that, we can chat further on that. No problem at all. We've got a couple of other questions that have come through. One is, how long should you let lead scoring bed in? So the question is, how long should you test lead scoring? So I guess, you know, in terms of like letting it bed in, getting a feel for what's right, what's wrong, what does the process typically look like for that?
Yeah, I mean, when we've been working on projects lately, I've sort of touched on it there. So reviewing it on a quarterly basis is a good place once you've actually implemented lead scoring. What I would say though is go ahead first of all and actually map out before you even go into the tool. By all means, go and have a play and see what you can and can't do. But I'd seriously recommend go ahead and mapping out, whether it's in a Google Doc, Google Sheet, whatever you want to do, map it out. Then go ahead and set up your scores. And then what I would actually go ahead and do is let it run for, I'd say, about a month or so. good couple of weeks just to see how those scores are actually applying, if they're applying.
Depends on
And
volume as
then
well, right? Like, whether
it,
you've got very low
exactly.
website traffic, high value focused leads, or if you've got, I don't know, large volumes of engagement, low investment. I guess there's a balance there as well, right?
Exactly. And it's just a case of you'd probably be surprised actually when you think, oh, actually, we think initially when you set it up, there are certain pages that we really hold like very highly in terms of actual value. But it turns out that maybe there might be another page in the background that you weren't even aware of. Loads of people are visiting, and you're like, oh, actually, we need to reassess the scoring for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer the question, I would say go ahead, map it out first, then go and implement. Maybe start small to begin with, like a few scores, don't go crazy with it, just to see how those scores are being applied. Then go ahead and have a look at your automations from that point on. And then I would say review quarterly just to see how those scores are doing. But as I said in the webinar, if you notice anything that doesn't work, just get rid of it straight away, just amend it straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Final question, relationship between marketing and sales, where do the accountabilities lie for lead scoring? It's a classic, right? Push and
Yeah.
pull. Why don't you talk through what typically we're seeing, or what tends to work, or where that can sit?
Yeah, so I know I've mentioned it a few times. We've been using with other clients who use different thresholds. It's completely dependent, but if we use 50 points as that typical threshold, what typically happens is there'll be an automation in place where someone hits 50 points, that then gets passed on to someone in the marketing team because ultimately it's a marketing tool to begin with, and it's reviewing marketing efforts. So then they'll hit 50 points, uh, pass to someone in the marketing team to actually go ahead and qualify that. And if they feel okay, yeah, we know that they're a hot lead, they're relevant, they're engaging with so many different elements on the site, they met our ICP, then it will then be passed on to the sales team, and that will then go, that can feed into another automation where you can review it. And if the sales team decide, no, maybe not for now, they could disqualify that lead, and that's when another what we've done before, another automation can be in place to reduce points. So soon as someone's disqualified, their life cycle goes back a little bit, it changes. They might get some negative points applied, and then
Yeah.
the journey sort of starts again.
What about the early process though, the initial stage process in terms of like building that out, building out those numbers? I mean, a lot of it's relating to marketing
Mm-hmm.
activity, but obviously the output is being fed to a sales team. What's your view in terms of early on and adoption of this? Is it about involving both teams at the same time? Is it about one team developing and then, getting buy-in from the other team? What's your view on that?
I think I would, and I know I've mentioned it a couple of times just now, but definitely if you can, before you even start looking at setting up lead scoring, if you
Yeah,
can get your marketing and sales teams together, get them aligned on the same thing, what we know is, because I'm sure, lead scoring is a brand new tool. So whatever
yeah,
has worked in the past, obviously by all means keep doing that. But I think when it comes to something new like this, getting your teams together, it's probably a really good opportunity to discuss what is and what isn't working because there
yeah,
must be a
yeah,
number of times when certain events or when elements are done, like especially marketing events, people landing on certain things, they get passed on sales, and sales might be like, "No, these guys aren't relevant." And if that is continually happening, that's something to hash out straight away before you even set up lead scoring. So yeah, getting the teams together initially and discussing for sure.
yeah. Fab. Brilliant. Okay, lovely. Well, James, thank you so much for your time. Some really great insight there. Really, really appreciate it. If anybody's got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. As James has said there on the screen, let us know how he did by leaving us a review. But yeah, if you've got any questions or anything that you'd like to find out more about, don't hesitate to reach out. Let's get connected on LinkedIn. Let's chat. Let's take the conversation further. Get yourself registered for our forthcoming webinars as well. But yeah, thank you again for your time, James. Much appreciated. Thank you to all of those who joined us on the session. Have a great rest of the day. Best of luck on your HubSpot lead scoring journey. Cheers, all the very best. Bye bye. Bye bye.